They do not even have proper exoskeletons or redundant organ systems or acidic blood defense mechanisms or literally anything useful, Commander Vrel, the Admiral had said. And I remember this very clearly because his 3 eyes had all narrowed at me simultaneously, which is quite the accomplishment. Train them. Anyway, so here I was, standing in the primary training hall, watching as Captain Marcus Webb completed his initial assessment forms with what I can only describe as offensive slowness. He was filling them out by hand. As if data pads had not been invented, as if we were living in some sort of pre-technological nightmare. He was tall for his species. I will give him that. Perhaps 6 feet and 2 inches in their antiquated measurement system, with the kind of lean muscle structure that suggested he actually knew what a gym was. His hair was dark and cut short in a military fashion, and his eyes were this peculiar shade of green that kept catching the overhead lights in unsettling ways. But mostly, he looked soft, breakable, like every other human I had encountered in my unfortunately long career. "Are you finished yet?" I asked, allowing my irritation to color my voice with what I felt was appropriate disdain. He looked up from his paperwork and smiled. Actually smiled, as if this were some sort of pleasant social gathering rather than the beginning of the most grueling training program in 4 sectors. "Just about, sir," he said. His voice was calm, measured, with that strange accent humans from the North American territory seemed to favor. I wanted to make sure everything was accurate. "I'll consider it," I said, and I did not bother to hide my sarcasm. "Now that you have completed your very important paperwork, perhaps we can begin. Unless you need to take a nap first? I understand humans require an absurd amount of sleep." To his credit, the smile did not waver. "I am good to go, sir." "Wonderful. Truly wonderful." I activated the training mat in the center of the room and the surface immediately shifted from its neutral gray to a combat-ready red. "We will start with basics. I need to assess your current skill level before I can determine how much remedial work will be necessary. And Captain Webb, I suspect there will be a great deal of remedial work." He stepped onto the mat without hesitation, moving with a fluidity that I had to admit was somewhat unexpected. Most humans lumbered around like they were still getting used to their own limbs. This one at least seemed to understand where his feet were supposed to go. "Standard engagement protocols," I said, taking my position opposite him. "First to 3 strikes wins the round. Strikes must be confirmed by the mat sensors to count. I will be using level 2 restrictions on my strength and speed to account for your species limitations." "That is very kind of you, sir," he said, and was that amusement in his voice? But unnecessary. I felt my mandibles click together in annoyance. "Captain, I have 4 arms, a skeletal structure 3 times denser than yours, and reflexes that would allow me to snatch a plasma bolt out of midair. Level 2 restrictions are not kindness. They are basic safety protocols to prevent me from accidentally killing you on your first day." "Understood, sir." He settled into what I recognized as a fighting stance, though a rather unusual one. His weight was distributed oddly, his hands held at angles that seemed to leave entire sections of his body exposed. "Whenever you are ready." I decided to make this quick. A fast demonstration of the incredible gulf between our species' capabilities would save us all a great deal of time and misery. I would tap him 3 times, he would realize he was hopelessly outmatched, and we could move on to teaching him how to properly operate a plasma rifle from behind adequate cover, which was realistically the only combat role his species was suited for. I struck. My upper right fist shot forward in a textbook jab, precisely calibrated to be fast enough to challenge him but slow enough not to cause permanent damage. It should have connected with his sternum in 0.47 seconds. It did not connect with his sternum. It did not connect with anything because suddenly his hand was wrapped around my wrist and he was moving, and the entire training hall decided to rotate 90 degrees. No? Wait. That was me rotating. I was the one moving. I was airborne. I hit the mat with an impact that knocked the air from all 3 of my lungs, and for a moment I simply lay there, trying to process what had just happened. The overhead lights seemed very bright, very, very bright. Captain Webb's face appeared above me, looking concerned. "Are you all right, sir? I thought you were pulling that punch." I responded with appropriate force. Appropriate force. Appropriate force. I had just been thrown across a training mat by a human, by a fragile little primate who should not have been able to even see my strike coming, let alone counter it, and he was asking if I was all right. I activated my secondary respiratory system and hauled myself to my feet, ignoring the way my pride was currently attempting to strangle my common sense. Again, this time I used 2 arms, simultaneous strikes from different angles, a combination that had successfully overwhelmed opponents with twice my experience. Surely this had been a fluke, a lucky grab, a momentary lapse in my concentration. He deflected my left jab with his forearm, ducked under my right cross, and somehow ended up behind me. I felt pressure on the back of my knee and then I was falling again, and this time when I hit the mat, the sensors chimed to indicate a confirmed strike. "That is one," Captain Webb said helpfully. I rolled away and came up in a defensive posture. All four arms spread wide. This was not possible. This was simply not possible. My species had been training in combat for 3,000 years. Humans had barely figured out space travel. The math did not make. "Perhaps," I said, and I was proud of how steady my voice was despite the fact that my entire worldview was currently crumbling. "We should take a moment to discuss your previous training." He shrugged, which is that peculiar gesture humans do where they raise their shoulders in a way that somehow communicates both acknowledgement and dismissal simultaneously. "Standard Earth military, sir. Marine Corps. Then some specialized programs after first contact, hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, survival skills. Nothing too exotic, nothing too exotic, nothing too exotic." "And how long have you been training in these hand-to-hand techniques?" "Actively. About 12 years, sir. 12 years. 12 human years, which was what, maybe 10 cycles? I had been training for 17 cycles with instructors who had been training for 50. This should not be happening. I attacked again. I did not mean to. I should have called for a pause, requested his full training records, perhaps performed some scans to make sure he was not secretly a human in a mechanical supersuit. But my pride, that treacherous thing, made me attack instead. This time I held nothing back. Level 2 restrictions went out the airlock. I came at him with everything I had, all four arms moving in patterns designed to overwhelm and confuse. My greater reach turned into a weapon itself, and he smiled. Not a mocking smile, I realized later. Not cruel or superior. It was the smile of someone who had finally found a challenge they could enjoy. The smile of a professional recognizing another professional. He moved like water, like smoke, like some impossible thing that should not exist in our ordered, sensible universe. Every strike I threw, he was not there. Every combination I attempted, he had already seen and countered. It was like fighting a prediction algorithm that had somehow learned to walk and talk and look annoyingly calm while making me feel like a complete amateur. And then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 seconds, I overextended. Just slightly. His hand shot out, caught my wrist again, that same wrist from the very first exchange, and this time I felt him pull in a very specific direction while his foot hooked behind my ankle and his other hand pushed against my shoulder, and every principle of leverage and physics that I thought I understood came together in a perfect storm of humiliation. I went down hard. The mat sensors chimed twice in rapid succession. "That is 3, Captain Webb said, and had the absolute nerve to offer me his hand to help me up. "Good match, sir." I stared at that hand for a long moment. Part of me wanted to refuse it on principle. Part of me wanted to call for security and have him ejected from the station. Part of me wanted to retire immediately and take up a quiet life on some agricultural world where nobody would ever ask me to train anyone ever again. Instead, I took his hand. He pulled me up with surprising gentleness, and I noticed that he was barely breathing hard despite the fact that he had just systematically dismantled a senior instructor with decades of experience. "How?" I asked, because I needed to understand. "How is this possible?" He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "If you want the technical answer, sir, humans have a few advantages that do not show up on standard physical assessment scans." Enlighten me. "Our pattern recognition is extremely fast. We evolved as persistence hunters, which means we are very, very good at reading body language and predicting movement. Add in the fact that we are one of the few species that can throw objects accurately, which requires incredible spatial awareness and timing, and you get beings who are naturally talented at understanding vectors and momentum." I felt my mandibles click thoughtfully. "That does not explain your speed." "No, sir. That would be adrenaline." He smiled again, and this time I noticed it did not quite reach his eyes. There was something else there, something I had not seen before. "We have a chemical response to stress that temporarily enhances our physical capabilities, faster reflexes, increased pain tolerance, improved muscle response. It is a bit like biological overclocking." "That sounds incredibly dangerous." "It is, sir. Long term. But in a fight?" He shrugged again. "It makes us competitive." Competitive. The human called what I had just experienced competitive. I had been completely and thoroughly defeated by someone I had dismissed as fragile and slow, and he called it competitive. I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, and realized that everything I thought I knew about humans was worse than wrong. It was dangerously incomplete. "Captain Webb," I said slowly, "I believe I owe you an apology." "No, sir," he said, and his voice was firm. "You did not know. Most species do not until they see it for themselves. We are new here. We look weak. I get it. You are not weak. No, sir. He agreed. We are not. And that is when I heard it. The sound that would haunt my sleeping cycle for weeks to come. The sound of the training hall doors opening and multiple footsteps entering and voices chatting casually about something called coffee and how the station never stocked the good kind. I turned, already knowing what I would see but hoping desperately that I was wrong. I was not wrong. Standing in the doorway were 5 more humans, all wearing coalition uniforms, all carrying the same requisition forms that had started this nightmare, all looking around the training hall with expressions that ranged from curious to eager. Commander Rel, one of them asked. A female with hair the color of rust and enough scars on her visible skin to suggest she had never heard of the concept of backing down. We are the rest of the human integration unit. Sorry we are late, our transport hit some delays. Are we interrupting? I looked at Captain Webb. He was trying very hard not to smile and failing completely. No, I said, in the tone of someone whose entire career had just become infinitely more complicated. You are not interrupting. You are in fact right on time. The female grinned. And it was not a friendly expression. It was the grin of a predator who had just spotted prey. Excellent. When do we start? When do we start? As if I had not just had my entire understanding of combat superiority demolished. As if there were not 5 more of these impossible creatures standing in my training hall waiting to do the same thing to every other instructor on this station. I glanced at the training schedule on my datapad. Somehow the universe had decided that I would be responsible for this group for the next 8 weeks. 8 weeks of having everything I thought I knew challenged, questioned, and probably thrown across a mat. We start now, I said, because what else could I say? Everyone onto the mat. We will begin with a full assessment of your current capabilities. As they filed past me, chatting among themselves with that casual confidence that I was beginning to realize was not arrogance but simply accurate self-assessment. Captain Webb paused beside me. For what it is worth, sir, he said quietly. You are an excellent fighter. You just made one mistake. And what mistake was that? His smile was almost apologetic. You assumed being human was a weakness. He walked away to join his unit, leaving me standing there with the ruins of my preconceptions scattered around my feet like debris from a cargo bay explosion. This, I thought as I watched the 6 humans begin their warm-up routine with the kind of casual efficiency that spoke of years working together, was going to be a very long 8 weeks. I had no idea how right I was. And more importantly, I had no idea how much I was going to learn. The thing about having your entire worldview shattered before breakfast is that you do not really get time to process it properly. One moment you are a confident senior instructor with 17 cycles of experience, and the next month you are watching 6 humans systematically work their way through your advanced combat obstacle course like it was designed for younglings. Time? I called out, checking my chronometer for the 4th time because surely the readings were wrong. They were not wrong. Lieutenant Kira Vance, the rust-haired female who had arrived late, dropped from the final obstacle platform and landed in a crouch that should have shattered her inferior human leg bones. Instead, she popped up, barely winded, and jogged over to where I stood with my datapad. How did we do, sir? She asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity in her voice, not smugness. Somehow that made it worse. You completed the course in 4 minutes and 17 seconds, I said flatly. Is that good? The station record held by a Kragathi shock trooper with cybernetic enhancements is 4 minutes and 42 seconds. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh. Should we run it slower next time? I stared at her. She was serious. She was genuinely asking if they should intentionally perform worse so as not to embarrass the other species on station. The consideration was almost insulting, except that I was beginning to realize it came from a place of actual concern rather than condescension. No, Lieutenant, I said, deactivating my datapad because looking at it was making my head hurt. You should not run it slower, you should run it exactly as you just did, because apparently everything I thought I knew about human limitations was fiction. Captain Webb, who had finished the course a full 10 seconds before anyone else on his team, walked over with 2 containers of that brown liquid humans seemed to survive on. He offered one to me. Coffee, sir? You look like you could use it. I do not drink stimulants, I said, which was not entirely true, but I was not about to start adopting human habits just because they had proven to be terrifyingly competent. Suit yourself. He took a long drink from his container and made a face. Vance was right about the station coffee. This tastes like recycled coolant. It probably is recycled coolant, said another human. This one a male named Thomas Park, who had some sort of technical specialty according to his file. The replicator system on this level has been acting up for weeks. I looked at it yesterday. You looked at it? I asked, seizing on this topic because it was something I could maybe possibly understand better than their impossible combat abilities. You are not station maintenance. No, sir. But I am decent with systems, and it was making a noise that bothered me. Turns out someone had cross-wired the protein synthesis matrix with the beverage dispenser. Easy fix. Easy fix. He had repaired a malfunctioning replicator system that station maintenance had been complaining about for 3 weeks, and he called it an easy fix. How long did this repair take you? I asked, already dreading the answer. Maybe 20 minutes would have been faster, but I had to fabricate a replacement coupling. The original had stress fractures. 20 minutes. A task that would have taken our maintenance crews hours, assuming they could even diagnose the problem correctly, and this human had fixed it in 20 minutes because the noise bothered him. I felt my secondary brain beginning to hurt, which should not have been possible because secondary brains do not have pain receptors, but somehow this day was making the impossible happen with alarming regularity. All right, I said, deciding that if I was going to have my entire understanding of reality rewritten, I might as well lean into it. New assessment. I want to see your performance in actual combat scenarios, not obstacle courses, not training drills. Full simulation. What level simulation, sir? Webb asked, and I noticed the rest of his team had gone very quiet, very focused. Level 7, I said, and watched their reactions carefully. Level 7 simulations were usually reserved for veteran special operations units preparing for high-risk missions. They involved multiple hostile combatants, environmental hazards, civilian complications, and absolutely zero safety protocols beyond the hard light projectors that prevented actual death. Pain, however, was very much on the table. Most species required months of preparation before attempting level 7. Some never attempted it at all. The humans looked at each other. Some sort of silent communication passed between them. The kind of wordless coordination that came from working together in actual combat situations rather than just training. Sir, Webb said carefully, before we agree to that, I need to ask, what are the rules of engagement for the simulation? Standard coalition protocols. Minimize civilian casualties, neutralize hostile targets, complete the primary objective. Why? Because, sir, human combat doctrine does not always align perfectly with coalition protocols. We have a tendency to improvise. Improvise, I repeated, and the way he said it made me think that improvise was perhaps a gentle way of saying something much more chaotic. Explain. Lieutenant Vance stepped forward, and I noticed she had the kind of expression that people wear when they are about to confess to something they know is going to cause problems. Sir, humans are very good at what we call adaptive tactics. When a plan stops working, we make a new plan, immediately, sometimes multiple new plans, and we tend to use our environment in ways that are not strictly speaking covered in standard operating procedures, such as, said a third human. A quiet male named David Kim, who I had barely heard speak until now. If there is a structural weakness in a building full of hostiles, we might bring the building down rather than clear it room by room. I felt my mandibles click in surprise. That would violate at least 7 coalition combat regulations. Yes, sir, Kim agreed, but it would also save lives on our side and minimize the duration of engagement. We do not have natural armor, or redundant organs, or regeneration abilities. When we fight to win as quickly and efficiently as possible, because every second we are in combat is a second we might die. It was the most honest explanation of combat philosophy I had ever heard, and it made a disturbing amount of sense. Humans fought like prey animals that had somehow learned to hunt, using speed and cunning and a willingness to take insane risks because their baseline survival capability was so much lower than every other species in the galaxy. Level 7 simulation, I said again because I needed to see this for myself. Standard rules of engagement, with one addition. You may use adaptive tactics as you see fit, but you will explain your reasoning after each major decision. I need to understand how your species thinks in combat. Webb smiled, and this time it was not the friendly smile from before. This was a smile with teeth. Understood, sir. Give us 5 minutes to gear check and brief. I watched as the 6 humans moved to the equipment lockers, their casual demeanor shifting into something much more focused and professional. They checked weapons with practiced efficiency, tested communication gear, and held a brief discussion using hand signals that I only partially understood. This, I realized, was what they actually looked like when they were working. Everything before had been them being polite, accommodating, playing nice with the other species on station. This was them preparing to do what they were actually built for. It was sobering. I activated the simulation chamber and loaded one of the more challenging level 7 scenarios. Urban environment. Hostile occupation force, 12 civilians trapped in a structure rigged with explosives. Secondary objective of capturing the hostile commander for intelligence purposes. Most teams took 45 minutes to complete this scenario. If they completed it at all, simulation will begin in 60 seconds, I announced over the chamber comm system. You will insert at the southern entrance. Hostile forces are estimated at 20 combatants with heavy weapons. The civilian structure is at the north end of the zone. Commander, you have tactical control. Webb's voice came back over the comm. Calm and clear. Acknowledged. Team. Standard dispersal pattern. Vance, you and Kim take high ground. Park, you are on tech. Morgan and Hayes, you are with me on ground level. Rules of engagement are capture preferred. Elimination authorized. Civilian safety is priority 1. Questions? There were no questions. Good. Someone remind me to file a complaint about the coffee when we are done. I heard laughter over the comm. Actual laughter. They were about to enter one of the most difficult combat simulations in the Coalition training database, and they were joking about beverages. The simulation began. For the first 30 seconds I thought maybe, just maybe, they would approach this like a normal unit. Cautious advance. Tactical assessment. Coordinated fire positions. I was wrong. They scattered like explosive shrapnel the moment the simulation environment materialized, moving in 6 different directions with what looked like complete chaos, but was actually, I realized as I watched, the tactical display, a devastatingly effective dispersal pattern. Within 15 seconds they had established overlapping fields of fire, identified hostile positions, and located 3 separate routes to the civilian structure. Contact left, someone called, and I saw simulated plasma fire light up one of the side streets. Vance and Kim had reached a 3-story building and were climbing. Not using the stairs. Climbing up the outside of the building using window ledges and architectural features like they were born to it. Moving with a speed that should have resulted in falls and broken bones. They reached the roof in under a minute and immediately began providing covering fire for the ground team. Park had done something to a nearby communication relay, and suddenly all of the hostile forces' coordination was gone. They were shouting at each other, confused, unable to link their tactical systems. Tech is down, Park reported calmly. They are running on visual contact only. Meanwhile, Webb, Morgan and Hayes had not bothered with a careful advance. They had gone straight into the densest concentration of hostile forces with a combination of speed, aggression and tactical awareness that made my combat training suddenly feel very, very theoretical. I watched Webb dodge simulated plasma fire by margins so thin that the heat should have caused burns, return fire with precision that dropped 3 hostiles in as many seconds, and somehow simultaneously coordinate his team's movement through a series of hand signals that were too fast for me to follow. A hostile with a heavy plasma cannon appeared on a balcony overlooking the human position. Before I could even open my mouth to warn them, Kim had put a round through the weapon's power cell from 200 meters away. The cannon exploded, taking the balcony and the hostile with it. North, approach is clear, Kim reported. Wait, correction. We have a secondary group moving to flank from the east. I see them, Vance said, and I watched her do something with her rifle that I was fairly certain was not in the manual. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each one ricocheting off different surfaces, and all 3 rounds found hostile targets that were behind cover. Not anymore. Show off, someone muttered. Bank shots are a legitimate tactic. They are a legitimate way to waste ammo. Children, Webb said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. Focus. We still have a primary objective. They reached the civilian structure in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Most teams took 20 just to clear a safe approach. Then things got complicated. Sir, Park said, and his voice had lost all traces of humor. This building is rigged to explode if we breach any of the standard entry points. The trigger system is distributed across multiple nodes. I can disable them, but it will take time we do not have. The structure is unstable. I leaned forward, watching the tactical display intently. This was the critical decision point. Most teams would call for specialist support, establish a safe perimeter, and begin a careful disarmament process. By the book, safe. Slow. Alternate entry points, Webb asked. Roof access is possible, but it is also rigged. Any breach will trigger the system. Can you override it? Not fast enough. The system is using redundant triggers. I would need to disable all of them within a 2-second window. Silence on the comm for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Webb spoke, and his voice was the kind of calm that came from making life and death decisions under pressure. New plan. Park, I need you to create a temporary electromagnetic pulse. Small scale, targeted at the building's detonator network. Can you do that? With what equipment, sir? Whatever you can improvise in the next 2 minutes. There was a pause. That is insane. Can you do it? Another pause, longer this time. Yes. But it will also fry every electronic system in a 30-meter radius, including our communication gear and weapon targeting systems. How long will the pulse last? 4, maybe 5 seconds. And the detonators will be disabled during that window? Should be. Probably. Maybe 70% certain. 70%. He was considering a plan with a 30% chance of failure that would also disable all of their electronic equipment in the middle of a combat zone. Do it, Webb said. Everyone else, manual weapon systems only. We go in during the pulse window, grab the civilians, and extract through the east corridor. Vance, Kim, you provide cover with manual sights. Just one, Vance said. This is completely insane, right? I am not missing something. It is completely insane, Webb agreed, which is why they will not be expecting it. 60 seconds, people. Park, work your magic. I watched, fascinated and horrified, as Park pulled components from 3 different pieces of equipment, connected them in ways that definitely violated manufacturer specifications, and created what was essentially a handheld electromagnetic bomb. 30 seconds, he said, his hands moving with practiced precision. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. Sir, if this does not work, I want it on record that I told you it was insane. Noted. 5 seconds. Everyone ready? A chorus of acknowledgements came back over the comm. Execute. Park activated his improvised device. Every electronic system in the area went dark. The building's detonator network died. The humans' communication gear went silent. Their weapon targeting systems flickered and failed, and they moved. I have seen fast assaults before. I have seen special operations teams perform extractions. I have seen some of the finest warriors in the galaxy conduct operations under pressure. I had never seen anything like this. They hit that building like a force of nature, moving through the darkened interior with nothing but manual sights and what appeared to be sheer audacity. No electronic support, no tactical overlays, no safety net of any kind. Just 6 humans trusting each other completely, moving as one organism through a hostile environment rigged to explode. They found the civilians in 90 seconds. They had them moving toward the exit in 2 minutes. They were clear of the structure in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The building exploded approximately 4 seconds after the last human cleared the threshold, because apparently the detonator system had backup triggers that Park's pulse had not reached. 4 seconds. They had missed being caught in that explosion by 4 seconds, and as I watched them regroup in the extraction zone, dusty and slightly singed but otherwise intact, I heard Webb's voice come back over the comm. Park, your device worked perfectly. Nice job. It fizzled out after 3 seconds instead of 5, sir. Did it accomplish the objective? Yes, sir. Then it worked perfectly. Everyone accounted for? 6 acknowledgements. Civilians? All 12 present and unharmed, Morgan reported. She was a medic. I remembered from her file. 2 are in shock, but stable. No serious injuries. And the secondary objective. There was a pause and then Kim's voice almost apologetic. About that, sir. The hostile commander decided to make a run for it during our extraction. He encountered Lieutenant Vance, and he is secured and ready for interrogation. He may have a mild concussion from resisting capture. I ended the simulation and opened the chamber doors. The 6 humans filed out, looking like they had just completed a routine training exercise, rather than a scenario designed to push elite operatives to their absolute limits. 18 minutes, I said, because someone needed to say something and my brain had apparently decided to focus on the time. You completed a level 7 scenario in 18 minutes. Was that good, sir? Vance asked, echoing her earlier question about the obstacle course. The previous record was 42 minutes. Oh, I looked at them. These impossible, infuriating, amazing creatures who had just rewritten every assumption I had about combat effectiveness and tactical planning. Captain Webb, I said slowly, I need you to explain something to me. Sir, that plan, the electromagnetic pulse, the manual entry, the 4-second margin, that was insane. Yes, sir, you could have all died. Yes, sir, and yet you proceeded anyway, with a 70% chance of success. Actually, sir, Park interjected. I said 70% certain the detonators would be disabled. The actual success probability was lower when you factored in all the variables. How much lower? Maybe 50-50, 50-50. They had executed a plan with even odds of success and complete odds of death if it failed, and they had done it without hesitation. Why? I asked, and I genuinely needed to understand. Why take that risk? Webb looked at me with those unsettling green eyes, and for a moment I saw something ancient there. Something that predated space travel and plasma weapons and galactic civilization. Something that came from a species that had learned to survive on a death world by being cleverer and faster and more willing to take chances than anything else around them. Because, sir, he said quietly, Those were civilians in that building, and where we come from, you do not leave people behind. Not if there is any chance, no matter how small, that you can save them. That is not a human tactic. That is human nature. I understood then. Finally. Truly understood. Humans were not strong because of their physical abilities, though those were more impressive than anyone had realized. They were not dangerous because of their technology, though they adapted to it with frightening speed. They were dangerous because they cared. Because they would take insane risks for people they had never met. Because they looked at impossible odds and saw chances worth taking. Because they had turned their weakness into their greatest strength by learning to work together with a level of trust that most species never achieved. 8 weeks, I said. More to myself than to them. I have 8 weeks to train you. Yes, sir, Webb agreed. I laughed. I could not help it. The absurdity of the situation finally caught up with me, and I laughed until my respiratory systems ached. Captain, I said when I finally regained control, I think you have that backwards. You are not here so I can train you. You are here so you can teach us. He smiled, and this time it was the friendly smile from earlier. Sir, I think we can learn from each other, and over the next 8 weeks we did. I learned about persistence hunting and pattern recognition and the way humans could push through injuries that would incapacitate any other species. I learned about improvisation and adaptive tactics, and why you should never ever assume that a human is out of options just because they appear to be cornered. But mostly I learned that strength comes in forms we do not always recognize, and that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are not always the ones with the biggest claws or the thickest armor. Sometimes they are the ones who smile at you before catching your wrist mid-punch, and politely demonstrate that everything you thought you knew was wrong. 6 months after that first training session, the Coalition deployed its first mixed-species special operations team. Half human, half various other species, all trained in both traditional Coalition tactics and what we had started calling adaptive doctrine. They had a 97% mission success rate. And yes, the station did eventually stock better coffee. Some changes are inevitable once humans get involved.